Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking episode 3 of Total Drama All-Stars called Saving Private Leechball. Overall, this is another really good episode. And this is an episode that I think is a little bit more heavy on the characterization than what we got last time around. Which I'm really happy about because there's quite a few interesting things to talk about here. Now, I think the main thing that's kind of going on here is sort of what seems to be the continuing thing is what's going on with Gwen. Now here, of course, we see her continuing to, but unintentionally seem like she's got it out for Courtney. And obviously Gwen is feeling really guilty about this, and even wondering at some point if she's doing this subconsciously, thinking like, gee, do I really actually deserve to be on the Vulture's team? And of course, this is all compounded by Heather and Joe trying to lure Gwen into an alliance. Now, Gwen is a big-time total drama veteran, so of course she sees this for what it is. But what I really like about this is that if you really are paying attention to what's going on, it's really clear that Heather is actually being much more successful at manipulating Gwen than Joe is. And that makes total sense. Heather won total drama, at least in one version of Season 3. And she's always done pretty darn well for herself. She was, what, number 3 in Season 1? So yeah, Heather is about as good at total drama as anybody can be. And like I said, she's obviously, in my book, seems to have greater success in manipulating Gwen. She's able to sort of just nudge Gwen along, while Joe is just sort of basically and also ran in the let's manipulate Gwen category. Even Alejandro doesn't really seem to have very much success with manipulating Gwen this time around. In any case, I can kind of see why Gwen, might be a little bit more vulnerable towards Heather. After all, she's just seen Heather's. She was there in Season 3. She got to see Heather's good side, even if that was happened to be a time when Gwen's worst side was on display. So I guess in a way it's almost the devil you know, right? But again, Heather versus Gwen is a long-standing rivalry on Total Drama, so I'm thinking that Gwen's probably going to be pretty reluctant to go for any kind of official alliance with Heather. But hey, you never know, right? And hey, speaking of Heather, I did definitely like the fact that Alejandro is still obviously has it for her pretty bad. That little Freudian slip he made today. Interesting stuff. And it's I'm actually kind of surprised that that's been kept on the back burner as much as it has been. But then again, admitting how they felt about each other was a major step in both Alejandro and Heather's characterization in Season 3. So yeah, I mean, Alejandro was even almost arguing with himself to a certain degree, or at least with Puppet Alejandro, when he's saying, this is how we will end it. Oh, I love that song so much. It's so good. It's so fun. Anyway, so I definitely did like that. Not a huge amount to say about what's going on with Mike and his evil side, just that it's slightly more interesting now that we've had some chance to expand on this. And Mike, looking at his personalities as something he can call upon, almost like a superpower, and then suddenly finding him completely abandoned by them, well, okay, that's also interesting stuff. Also, Zoe, man, Zoe was a pretty serious competitor last time around, but wow, it looks like Zoe's been really staying in shape. Some of that stuff she was doing, that's some serious dexterity on display. Now, as I said last time around, one of the things that I'm really liking about this season is seeing the interactions between the folks from last season and some of the Total Drama veterans. Excuse me. And this time around, the really interesting, coming together that we see is between Cameron and Sierra. Now, obviously, these are two very geeky people, so it's really not a huge surprise that they would actually get along. Now, I was genuinely surprised when Sierra started projecting Cody onto Cameron. Now, granted, Cody and Cameron are also guys who were cut from rather similar cloth. At their cores, they seem to be fairly decent guys. They're sort of nerdy dudes. They're not exactly the most athletic guys around. And apparently Sierra has a fondness for that sort of thing. But, Gwen is not the only genre-savvy person around, and I love how Cameron just flat out and pretty quickly recognizes what's going on with Sierra, and he flat out even says he saw what Cody went through in season 3, and he'd rather go and risk starving, freezing, and being mauled by animals on Boney Island than put up with too much of this. Now, I have to say, I think Cameron's being a little overly optimistic in this idea that a little separation is going to cool Sierra's fires. If what we've seen from her and her putting her phone with a picture of Cody on it to bed, absence doesn't just make the heart grow fonder in terms of Sierra. Absence makes the creepy, borderline obsession, you need to be slapped with a restraining order feelings blaze like an inferno. I mean, it's going up, it's burning like Southern California during Santa Ana season. That was probably rather insensitive of me, but I don't really care. So, anyway. Oh, yeah, one thing I forgot to mention about what was going on with Gwen this episode is what's going on with her relationship with Duncan. Now, for the most part, from what we've seen of this thing so far, it really seems like a serious downward spiral. And Gwen at one point in this episode even says to Duncan, "You don't know me at all." And then Duncan goes and completely surprises her by sacrificing himself to save her. Again, showing a little bit of a glimmer of his better nature that we really haven't seen too much of since season 1. Now, I don't really have any great hopes that this is going to last. I think the writers have firmly decided to have Duncan walk the path of the dark side, or however you want to put it. But still, this was just an interesting twist that is genuinely believable in terms of Duncan's character. He obviously does care about Gwen. And, of course, it complicates the whole situation for Gwen even more. She just said to this guy, "You don't know me at all." And then here Duncan does something that makes her wonder, well, geez, do I really have Duncan pegged as well as I thought I did? And, of course, this all leads into Courtney and Duncan switching teams. And I don't think I need to emphasize too much just how much the stuff is potentially is there in a position to hit the fan with Gwen and Courtney now on the same team. But speaking of glimmers of better nature, look at Courtney. She actually does seem to genuinely have felt bad about not getting Sam any breakfast. Now, granted, she immediately turns this to her advantage, but you can see when she first sees the people doing it, she's like, "Oh, why didn't I think to do that?" Now, I suppose you could also make the case that this is just Courtney realizing that someone had come up with a good idea that wasn't her, but still, Courtney's, well, I have to say, I do definitely think that Courtney's much better suited to be a villainous vulture, but it's not as if she hasn't shown occasionally a better side to her nature. In fact, actually, we saw a fair bit of it on display in Season 1 in regards to her relationship with Duncan. I mean, Courtney's really great flaw is that she's just insanely competitive and, also has a pretty high opinion of herself. With Heather being, Courtney ramped up even further, although probably somewhat more competent. So, again, interesting stuff. And of course now, let me see here. Do we have... Yes, I think we do. We have Courtney, Gwen, and Heather all on the same team, and oh, is this not a recipe for disaster? Not a huge amount to say. Oh yeah, one thing to say about Zoe is I definitely like that little nod to the Matrix in this episode. Man, has it really been 14, 15 years since that movie came out? Oh man, how time flies, huh? How time flies. Now, I can't really say that I was hugely surprised to see Jo being one of the people who was cut. Again, she's just too much like Heather and Courtney. And frankly, there's really not a whole lot of, well, to put it simply, drama to be had with Jo. I mean, Jo's a very good physical competitor, but she can't really play the game beyond that. She's not a manipulator. The only person that she was able to really manipulate very well last season was Lightning, and he was so stupid he couldn't even tell that she was female. So, yeah, we see that Jo just does not have that particular skill, and that's part of what costs her getting cut this episode. So, looking at who's left, well, obviously there's still story to be told with Alejandro and Heather. There's still story to be told with Gwen and Courtney. There's still story to be told with Mike. Now they've just started this new thing that's going on with Cameron and Sierra. And I'm thinking that basically the rule of storytelling, if you want to do something like this, involves introduction, escalation, and resolution. Now we get introduction and escalation this time around. But it's not a huge amount of escalation. I think that if you really wanted to do it properly, you need to give one episode of Sierra in full-blown obsessive mode with Cameron in order to do it proper justice. And then, of course, the next logical step would be to, in some way, resolve this. So I think those two are probably going to be safe, at least for another 2 episodes. If there's anybody around currently who's probably chaff, I'm thinking it's going to be Sam and Scott. Now, again, normally I don't really make predictions about this sort of thing because, well, if you make predictions, 90% of the time you're going to be wrong. I'm just pointing out who I think, in terms of storytelling, has the most story left. And if there's one thing about Total Drama is that you can kind of count on them to keep the people who have the most story to tell around the longest. So make of that what you will. Anyway, guys, that's all I've got for you this time around. Again, another really solid episode. I had a lot of fun watching it, and I'm definitely looking forward to the next episode. So, until next time, please comment, rate, and subscribe. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at HoosierJedi. And until next time, take care and have a good one.